Hi, I'm Scott Beaulier, host of EconVersations and director of the Manuel Johnson Center for Political Economy at Troy University. Tonight on our show, I have with us John Allison, retired CEO and former chairman of BB&T Company, the 10th largest bank in the United States. Mr. Allison was CEO from 1989 until 2008, a period of a lot of change in banking, and he's going to talk to us tonight about his experiences as CEO and chairman of BB&T and how his emphasis on core values within that organization helped it navigate the financial crisis, helped it rise to be one of the biggest banks in the United States, and what that's meant for him both as an executive but also as an individual. So John, it's great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. John is also a part of the Johnson Center's core support group as well. We've been supported by a $3.6 million grant. 1/3 of that was courtesy of BB&T's charitable foundation, which you help oversee as well. So we appreciate your support of our program too.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Let's get into the financial crisis, which is what you're going to talk about tonight in an evening talk with students. And I want to just kind of hear what that experience was like to be someone at the helm of a big bank as just policies were changing by the hour, and what it was like to try to manage your bank in 2008.
It was a very challenging environment, obviously, and just as a context, while individual financial institutions made a lot of mistakes, and if I'd been in charge, I'd have let some of them fail, the real cause of the financial crisis was government policy. The Federal Reserve printed too much money because they didn't want us to have bad times. It created what's called a bubble in the residential real estate market, driven by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and the affordable housing, i.e. subprime lending programs that the government wanted to try to raise home ownership, and it had some really disastrous economic consequences. And then as the crisis unfolded, unfortunately, it was handled very poorly. I'm a long-time CEO, as you described there, and I went through the early 1980s. We had another financial crisis, the early 1990s, and neither one of them were nearly as bad as this one. And one of the reasons is that government policy was so unpredictable. They saved Citigroup, they let Wachovia fail. They saved Goldman Sachs, they let Lehman fail. And it was a very uncomfortable environment. And I was personally adamantly opposed to TARP, the so-called bank bailout. I thought it might help in the short term. What we were doing was keeping companies that should go out of business from going out of business, and that would hurt us in the long term because we were reinforcing bad behavior. And there was also a misconception that if a bank failed, it disappeared. Probably everybody listening to this show is flown around on bankrupt airlines and you didn't even know you were on them. Right. It wasn't, if they failed, they weren't going to disappear, but their shareholders would have had to pay the price. So I thought TARP was a very bad reinforcement for unacceptable behavior by some companies.
And in fact, you wrote an open letter to Congress, if I remember correctly, saying, please, we've struggled during the financial crisis too at BB&T, but we feel it's only right to not reward banks who are doing less well when we're navigating this crisis in fairly okay shape. It's not keeping the playing field even to some extent is kind of what you said in the open letter.
Yeah, in the long term, what it says is that people that run sound businesses are reasonably conservative and safe in how they run their businesses. When the bad times come, they're not going to get any reward. And the people that take too much risk, the bad times come, the government's going to bail them out. Right. And a really interesting example of that is Chrysler, by the way. It's a little bit off the subject, but Chrysler failed in the 1980s, and it was bailed out by the government. It was considered successful. However, Chrysler failed again, and now the Italians own Chrysler. And the lesson learned is really what's important. What the unions and the management of Ford and General Motors learned was the government would bail you out. So they didn't discipline their businesses. Plus, if Chrysler had failed, their plants weren't going away, their workforce was going away. Some of the assets would have gone to Ford and General Motors, made them better companies, but a lot of them may have gone into there was a private equity movement, and we may have had a non-union automobile manufacturer in the U.S. People talk about the genius of the Japanese, but the Japanese only genius is they have non-union plants. Yep. That's it. And we could have had a lot of the Japanese intrusion in the automobile business could have been stopped with a private U.S. non-union plant that could have been an offshoot if they'd have let Chrysler fail back in the 1980s.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing to imagine. You know, in the Southeast, we have a number of foreign plants.
Right.
To think that it could have been an American one.
It could have been an American-owned
Yeah.
plants.
Your views and your outlook as an executive are pretty unique. You're willing to defend the morality of capitalism. You've been doing that as an executive, and now as a retired executive, you continue to do so. It's something we don't have many executives doing. Most of them want to stay away from issues of morality, issues of what's the right thing to do. Are executives that you've interacted with actually sympathetic to your view of the world and they just don't want to say it? Or are they just kind of neutral on that and just want to focus on making money?
I think there are several categories. I find entrepreneurs that started their own business really understand some of the more fundamental issues, the issues of principle and morality of capitalism, and are often very supportive, not always. Unfortunately, I find the CEOs of large public companies, sometimes the way they get promoted is by playing a political process, and unfortunately they end up being crony capitalists, that they're looking for some kind of dole from the government themselves. Now, I actually think crony capitalism is an oxymoron. You can't, capitalism, the government can't give you favors, right? It's really crony socialism. And unfortunately, the crony socialists that run public companies often give capitalism, give free markets a bad name because people understand they shouldn't be getting dole from the government, but the government shouldn't be able to give it. What we really need is a separation of business and the state, like we have a separation of religion and state. And that's not, in a way, it's a capitalist's fault because they're asking for the money, but in another way, if the government couldn't give it away, there wouldn't be any money to give away. And unfortunately, a lot of CEOs, they give lip service to free markets, but they don't really believe in a free market because they really want a favor to their company, right? They want an uneven, unlevel playing field for them, and that's a shame. Yeah. That's a shame.
It is. In 2009, you were profiled in a Morningstar magazine article in which you were named the runner-up to Warren Buffett as CEO of the Year. And in that profile, it talked about BB&T and the emphasis on core values within BB&T. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of mission and kind of staying the course on what that mission is and always relating things back to mission and how that contributed to the success of your company?
Absolutely. I believe having the right principles is the foundation for organizational success and also for personal happiness. And you have to develop your principles with a long-term context. It includes a vision of what you want to accomplish, a mission, and the set of values that you're going to run the business back. And BB&T is very much a mission-driven business. Our mission is to make the world a better place to live by helping our clients achieve economic success and financial security, by creating a place where our employees can learn and grow and be fulfilled in their work, by making the communities where we work a better place to be, and thereby optimizing the long-term return to our shareholders while creating a safe and sound investment. We're not confused. In a free market, our primary obligation is to our shareholders. We work for our shareholders. But what is important to understand is that is an effect. And this is the cause of that is doing a great job for your clients because all your revenues come from your clients. In our business, which is very much a people business, the only way we can do a great job for our clients is to have great people. We've got to create the kind of environment where our people want to work for BB&T, where they can do the right things for the clients. And we do all that within the context of our communities, not from an altruistic perspective, but if our communities aren't economically healthy, our banking business won't be healthy. So we try to take a really long-term perspective on the business, do the right thing for clients, employees, communities, and in that context create superior rewards for shareholders. So we're very shareholder-oriented, but we understand the cause of that. And when you're, I'll give you a concrete example. We didn't do the negative amortization or what they call the pick-a-payment mortgages, which were very destructive. And the way a pick-a-payment mortgage works is somebody comes in, they buy a house, and their interest expense is $1,000 a month, but they only have to pay $500 a month, so every month they're owed more on their mortgage. Right. It sounds crazy now, but it was a very popular product in places like southern Florida where house prices were going up, and people made a lot of money, at least in the short term, doing that. Right. We chose not to do it over ethics, not economics, because one of our fundamental commitments is to help our clients achieve economic success and financial security. That's what we do here. And one thing I've told our employees many times over the years, never ever do anything that you believe is bad for your client, even if you can make a profit in the short term, because it'll always come back to haunt you. And if you do the right things for your clients, they'll be more loyal and your company will be more successful. So our obligation is to give you the best financial advice we possibly can. Now that doesn't mean you'll accept it, and we can't be, you may make your own decision, but we never want to tell you to do something that makes us money and hurts you, because it'll come back to haunt us. It's not in our long-term interest to do that. And so we didn't do pick a payment mortgages because we knew it was bad. I could visualize, you know, house prices are not going up 10% a year forever. It's mathematically impossible. If I could visualize we're going to have young people who we'd help get in financial trouble knowing we shouldn't do it. And you never want to have anything you got to apologize for.
Yeah. Would another example of this be the position you took as executive of BB&T on Kilo versus New London? The Supreme Court ruled that in essence it was okay to take people's property if the investment being made on that property increased overall public value. So if a Walmart wanted to go in and just take a person's land, it could be justified under the ruling because it was creating greater economic value. That seems like something that you could have jumped on as a bank and made a lot of money doing, but you chose to take a position of we simply will not do this ever, if I understand your position correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah. We said that, you know, eminent domain had traditionally been used for things like roads. Okay, that may be legitimate, but to take your property and give it to somebody else, that was just a private individual under the theory that what they were doing was somehow better than what you were doing, we thought was very inconsistent with the principles that made America great. And I could visualize us taking some poor old lady property who'd lived in this house for 50 years and wouldn't sell it and to get Walmart there. And I just thought I wouldn't feel good about doing that, and our organization wouldn't feel good about doing that, and our employees wouldn't feel good about doing that. So we said we wouldn't finance those kind of projects. And it was an interesting experience too, Scott, because we didn't know what the consequences would be. We just knew that we would feel bad about doing it. It would be unethical from our worldview. But the consequences actually turned out to be very positive for BB&T. We had some municipalities that moved their checking accounts because we wouldn't support their projects, but we had thousands of individuals move their accounts to BB&T. And I got, of course, a lot of people had been, before this decision, eminent domain had actually been abused a lot. But the real thing was people said, look, we're really glad to deal with a business that acts on principle. That our experience is business will do anything for a buck. And you've decided something on principle, and we want to do business with a business that acts on principle because they would probably treat me better in the long term. And I actually think they were right to feel that way. That was a good way to judge a business.
You've been very clear that one of the big influences on you and also on the way that you shaped BB&T's mission and vision was Ayn Rand, and particularly her Atlas Shrugged. Can you tell us a little bit about when you came to Atlas Shrugged and how the ideas in Atlas Shrugged kind of were mapped into what you were doing at BB&T? Obviously respecting people's private property, like the Kilo decision is an example, but it's up and down the organization that this emphasis on principle and checking your premises, what am I doing, am I doing good, is something that's coming from deep philosophical roots for you.
It is. I read Atlas Shrugged back when I was in college in the late 1960s. I studied a lot of Rand's other works after that. My initial goal was really to get clear about my own personal principles. It wasn't really about getting to be CEO of BB&T or even running BB&T, because I wanted to be at peace with my own values. I had a lot of conflicting values that I wasn't clear about, so I started studying philosophy and stumbled on Rand, and for me it became transformational. Rand talks about virtues, and we incorporated her virtues into how we run our business. We actually had 10 core values, but the three great virtues that underlie those values are purpose. Individuals and organizations have to have a sense of purpose, and we think it has two components. People want to make the world a better place to live, and at the same time they should want to pursue their own happiness. So how do you create an organization where people can feel like they're making the world a better place to live and doing something they want to do for themselves? And it's important that they get to do something they want to do for themselves. Second, Rand is a huge advocate of reason. And we talked about making logical decisions based on the facts, being reality grounded. When I look at the really bad mistakes that people make in business, and I think in life, it's classically a case of evasion, where they're presented with some information they don't want to hear, and they just make a decision. So we were very disciplined in the thinking process. Well, not about genius, but about making really disciplined decisions, facing the facts, good news, bad news, being very transparent. I always thought the most important thing you can do is let the bad news out. You know, people need to hear that. And then the third virtue Rand talks about, self-esteem. And she particularly talked about it in terms of work. And if you think about it, for most people, the single biggest driver of your self-esteem is your work. Now, raising children is important work, so I'm using this in a broad context, but something I said to the employees of BB&T. It's real important to BB&T that you do your job well, but it's far, far more important to you. You might fool me about how well you do your job, you might fool your boss, but you'll never fool you. And if you don't do your work the best you can possibly do it, give them your level of skill, your level of knowledge, you can't do the impossible. If you don't do your work the best you can possibly do it, you will lower your self-esteem. Now here's the good news, the flip is true. Do your work the best you can possibly do it. Give them your level of skill, give them your level of knowledge, and you'll raise your self-esteem, which is more important than whether you get a promotion or whether you get more money. And by the way, when your employees see their work and how important it is to who they are as a human being, they do their work better for themselves, right? They're helping you as a client, but they're really doing it for themselves in the sense that they get the reward of having done something well. And those were three, I thought, really brilliant insights that Rand had in personal happiness and organizational success.
She's often viewed as, one of the 20th century's great defenders of greed, selfishness, and people have pointed to the financial crisis and our current turmoil in the economy and with high unemployment and whatnot, and they've actually blamed that on greed and selfishness. Can we defend Rand from this accusation? Can we defend the idea of self-interest as you understand it?
Sure. First, let me talk about the financial crisis. Okay. There was absolutely a tremendous amount of greed on Wall Street. And I've been in the banking business 40 years. There's always been a tremendous amount of greed on Wall Street every day. If the financial crisis was caused by greed, then all the good times we've had were caused by greed. I mean, it's just not, it's a non-event in the financial crisis. The markets are driven by people pursuing aggressively sometimes. Sometimes they get fearful. Right now, you can argue one of the biggest problems we have in our economy is a lack of greed, right? People are afraid to act. They're scared to make investments and go for the money. So I think greed is a non-explanation. It's government policy that caused the financial crisis, bad mistakes by the Federal Reserve and Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. People misunderstood saying what Rand was saying. What she said is people should act in their rational self-interest properly understood. What does that mean? First, you don't take advantage of other people, because taking advantage of other people is not selfish, it's self-destructive. First, people won't trust you. You might fool Tom, Dick, and Harry, but they're going to tell Jane and Sue. Secondly, it's actually psychologically destructive if you try to manipulate other people. But she also said that each of us has a moral right to our own life. Ask the question for you or for all your viewers. Do you have as much right to your life as anybody else has to their life? Of course you do, right? And so her moral prescription, which I totally agree with, was the Trader principle. Life is really about getting better together. In our business, we help our clients achieve economic success, financial security. They let us make a profit doing it. Life is about creating win-win relationships. There are only two stable relationship conditions, win-win and lose-lose. If we get greedy and we set up a win-lose, you see this in spousal relationships, it ends badly in a lose-lose. Or if we get self-sacrificial and we set up a lose-win, we get bitter and we end up in a lose-lose. So life is about creating win-win relationships. In any relationship that's important to you, you should ask the question, what's in it for me? But you should also ask the question, what's in it for them? Because if there's nothing in it for them, in the end there will be nothing in it for you. So it's a character to talk. A lot of people talk about being selfish as taking advantage of. That's not what Rand is talking about. What she really says is to be selfish, you have to have a purpose. You have to take care of your mind, right? Read, learn, think. You have to take care of your body. And you'd want to create meaningful human relationships. What if everybody had a clear sense of purpose, took care of their mind, their body, and created human relationships? That'd be a pretty good world, right?
Too bad. Yeah.
I had a family member that drank 24 beers a day, got cirrhosis of the liver, drank 24 beers a day, died. People say he's selfish. No, he wasn't selfish. He was self-destructive. Yep. A lot of people confuse just hedonism and stupid stuff as being selfish. No, taking care of yourself and the things you care about, your family. If you love your children, it's not a sacrifice to take care of your children because you love them, right? That's what Rand was really talking about.
Let's go back to the beginning of your answer, which was a little bit about the financial crisis, and then this trader's principle, the idea of creating win-win relationships, creating value. How do we do that in the new normal? If you could just be dropped down into the policy debate and fix things, how do we even get back into some kind of normal? People have now described the new era as too big to fail. Everything can be justified under systemic risks as deserving bailouts. How do we get back to, instead of taking care of others and sacrificing for others, an idea that we have the right to ourselves and should be able to just create value through trade instead? Are there things that can be done, or is it just too late?
Well, mostly it's a philosophical fight in the sense that America was founded on the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness is each individual pursuing their own personal happiness. And we need to restore that each individual has the right to their life. There's no such thing really as society, right? That's a little bit of an oxymoron. It's just other people, right? and we need to get back to people have the right to their own life. In terms of policy, I know you've run the numbers too, Scott. It's scary.
It is.
I mean, the unfunded liabilities under Social Security and Medicare and pension plans, and we're running $1.5 trillion debt. It's a scary number. We've got to fix it, though, or the United States goes broke in 20, 25 years. It's a mathematical certainty. That's not a political position. Right. It's just running the numbers, and unless we change direction. Yep. The good news is we can fix it if we act reasonably soon. But it requires some courage and leadership, and then also we can't fix it without some pain. I use the analogy of having a cancer that's terminal if not treated. The good news is treatable. The bad news is treating it's not going to be fun. But we can do it. First thing we need to look at our tax policy, and we need something like a flat tax or a fair tax, which would actually raise tax revenues without raising tax rates. What the president's proposed, raising tax rates normally reduces tax revenues.
That's right.
I mean, it's a counterproductive idea. We need to radically reduce government spending, including military spending. We ought to be defending the United States. We're in an interesting 3 wars at one time. We really need to eliminate regulations. In my career, the regulatory burden for a typical business is up 100 times. When I made my first loan, you could do it with 2 sheets of paper. Now you go get a loan as a book, right? That's all regulation. And all the creative minds, all the entrepreneurs, I think about the people running a bank today. The CEO of a bank probably spending at least half his time and maybe 90% of his energy trying to make government bureaucrats happy. How can you be innovative, creative? How can you serve your customers when you're trying to make a bunch of government bureaucrats happy instead of really do your work? Regulation is really strangling our economy. And if we could change direction alone, we could get more optimistic. And then there's some technical things that you and I share that the Federal Reserve, to me, is dangerous. They're printing money like crazy. Sound money is essential for a healthy economic system, and they're really redistributing wealth. I mean, the Federal Reserve's holding interest rates below what the market would be. That means that my mother, who's 85 years old and lives on her savings, Ben Bernanke's taking money out of her pocket. Now, I'm going to take care of my money and I can afford to do it, but she's worried about it because now she's having to spend her principal. So he is choosing, he's an unelected government bureaucrat. He is having the power to redistribute wealth away from older people that have saved and give it to people that hadn't saved, right? Trying to reward people that borrow too much money. That's a funny kind of justice, right? And that you shouldn't have a Federal Reserve that does that kind. We need a market-based system, and a sound dollar is fundamental for a healthy economy. Businesses can't make investments. We're in kind of a slow growth environment, but everybody knows that the Fed's been printing out money like crazy. So if you're going to make a 5 or 10 year investment which creates jobs, you don't know what the cost of your inputs is going to be in the future. I was talking to a guy at the National Restaurant Association who owns 25 or 30 restaurants. I asked him if he was going to open any restaurants, and this was about 6 months ago. This year he said no. He says, the reason I'm not is I know they've been printing money, and commodity prices always go up first before I can raise my retail price. So if I open a restaurant, I'm going to lose money for several years, so I'm not going to do it. And that there's the jobs that weren't created in that process. And you get a self-defeating kind of phenomenon going on.
Very frustrating.
It's a shame. It's unnecessary.
We have just a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to make sure to spend a minute or two on your philanthropic efforts and the programs that you have across the Southeast and throughout much of the BB&T footprint, these programs on the morality of capitalism, the promotion of the ideas you've been talking about with me tonight, free enterprise and a responsible individual ethic. Can you talk about what your vision is for these programs and how that's fitting into the kind of change you'd like to see? in society?
Yeah, I think ultimately people act consistent with their ideas. So unfortunately, we can blame our politicians, but we get the politicians we deserve, right? Because people don't have the right ideas. And we think it's very important that the principles that underlie a free society, including the moral principles, be presented to university students. And it's interesting, frankly, that doesn't happen in our universities today unless somebody sponsors that happening. And what BB&T is, we've now sponsored 68 programs on the moral foundations of capitalism. Many people realize that capitalism produces a higher standard of living, but a lot of people view capitalism as amoral or immoral. While obviously there are individual capitalists that are immoral, the system is moral because it's just. It rewards superior contribution and punishes bad contribution. The government can screw that up, but that's not capitalism, that's something else. That's government interference in markets. And we think it's really important for students to understand that it's an ethical system, and then to understand the personal behavior that they need to have, that they need to be purposeful, they need to be honest, they need to have integrity, not as some kind of duty, but as a means to their own success and their own happiness. And we have about 25,000 students that go through these programs every year, and we've had thousands and thousands of students say it really changed my worldview. I wish the university had talked about this somewhere else. You know, this is the first time I've ever heard these ideas, and I've been going to school since I was, 5 years old. And the ideas that underlie America are not necessarily taught in our universities today, and that's not good.
Yeah, I've had great experiences. I taught the Atlas Shrugged program at my previous job, and we have someone who will be teaching it next semester here too, and I think students will be eager for that class. And in fact, I think you hit it on the head by saying they're hungry for these ideas and really interested in engaging. So we appreciate the support here too. We're about out of time tonight. I thank you for being with us at Troy today, and we're really looking forward to your talk tonight too. For those who are tuning in tonight, next week's show will be about entitlements and the rising entitlements that we're seeing in the big three programs in the United States: Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. How big is this problem? Is it a mathematical certainty that it's just going to explode? And what can we do about it? So tune in for that, and thank you for joining us.